Now we have a panel discussion on unlocking the omni-channel CX potential for Bharat. This session will cover points like creating right tailor-made content for this audience, designing strong CX for Bharat audience. CX plays a strong role in creating word of mouth in Bharat market, etc. I would like to invite Satrajit Sen, Head Product and Community, ETBrandEquity, to moderate the discussion. It's my pleasure to invite the co-panelists, Krishna Mohan, Nyayapati, Director, Emami Agrotech, Namit, Bajoria, Managing Director, Kutchina, Himanshu Chakrawarti, President, Snapdeal. Welcome everyone. Over to you, Satrajit.
Namaste everyone. Welcome to this session titled Unlocking the Omnichannel CX Potential for Bharat. So we are talking about Bharat market here. The Bharat market is basically the market that resides beyond the metro cities in India. India has been through tough times and we are still battling the COVID-19 pandemic. And this pandemic has brought new norms for business today. The new normal for customers is to interact and shop for brands both online and offline. And this pandemic situation has pushed the brands to create seamless customer experiences across offline and online touchpoints. This touchpoints and this practice has massively changed because of the pandemic. And as per industry standards, 73% of customers switch between an average of 4 channels during their purchase journey before really buying a product. And this characteristic is quite constant when it comes to the Bharat consumers today, the non-metro consumers that we are speaking about. People in the non-metro and rural markets in India are looking for similar experiences, if not better. In today's session, we are taking a deep dive into how brands and businesses are creating and strategizing their winning customer experience strategies and that are being adopted by the Bharat consumer here. I'm honored to be joined by a plethora of brands and industry leaders in this panel today who will help us take a deep dive into this subject. It's my great honor to introduce my esteemed panel today. In no particular order, Mr. Krishna Mohan Nyayapati, Director of Emami Agrotech. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Satrajit.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Namit Bajoria, Managing Director at Kutchina. Welcome, Namit.
Thank you, Satrajit.
And I also have Mr. Himanshu Chakrawarti, President at Snapdeal. Welcome, Himanshu.
Thank you.
Great. First of all, a warm note of thanks for everyone to join us today and helping us and our audiences understand the Bharat potential, the Bharat market better. So before we start, I really want to come to my brands panel here and basically come to all my panels about the pandemic. So the pandemic has been real in that sense, right? We have already been through 2 waves of pandemic, and we are on the 3rd wave now. And I really want to understand from each of you here, how has the consumer behavior changed, especially when we have been through these 2 phases, and currently we are going through the 3rd phase. So we can start with Mr. Krishna here. Mr. Mohan, if you can guide us through your customer journey and how has your customer really changed, the expectations and their behavior, how they have changed during the pandemic session.
Thank you, Satrajit, and greetings to everyone here. I think I'll take a step back to answer this question. What we saw during the last couple of years now is the segmentation of the consumer itself changed, is my perception of how I take these things about. I would like to resegment this whole consumer on the basis of their behaviors and on the basis of their influences on the overall Bharat that we are talking about. There is one Bharat within our metros, which is a strong Bharat. It's not small in number. These are people who have come out of the small towns or rural villages working in the metros, but their behaviors or their value systems are more core and more closer to their roots, but they want to change into the modern aspirations of the metro consumer. So this is what I call them, the modern Bharat. So we cannot ignore them because they played a big role in the way the consumer evolved during this pandemic. These set, there is a small subset of it, or maybe a big subset, without getting political in nature at this stage on the discussion point, which was the moving Bharat. That is, people who moved from the metros to their roots back, either because of the safety issues in their towns or cost issues in their cities. So they moved back. And while going back, they had their influences, they had their behaviors changed and influenced the change into the third segment, which I call the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 cities, which I call the Mahabharat. This is the Bharat which is evolving. This is the Bharat which is progressing faster than the metro, but they want to break free. But the pandemic has resulted in a big change therein, is my opinion. Last but not the least, the Akhand Bharat, which is our rural. I mean, this is huge. There is a huge nature of villages, towns, cultures that we have evolved, and they behaved in a certain way during this whole 2 years journey that we have. Now, let me start with how did they adopt. In my opinion, the first phase, largely, as we all know, and this is now cliched subject, but for the sake of repetition, it's better to repeat, was largely about the behavior change made by the modern Bharat. That is, the metros were most affected, and the moving Bharat. These two are the biggest influences of the first phase of pandemic, wherein the changes happened. The Mahabharat, that is the tier 1, and the Akhand Bharat, which I call it as the rural, and I keep repeating this terminology so that I am on the subject parameters very clearly. I don't think much happened during the phase 1 as far as the change is concerned. It was all about the metro specific, because the pandemic was very specific or very hard hitting on the metros, and also the people who moved from the metros to the smaller towns, and that's the influences of this. Within the first phase, now if I talk about and how these two evolved, we had the consumer needs changing from basic survival. The first instinct was survive. So what do I need? Basically the food, staples, which is, and we companies like us did well during this time because we could manage supplies, hygiene, health, house and migration issues. These were some of the things that the people were concerned about. So they upstocked, they moved wherever they can with the safety and grabbed whatever they can. So the brands were nowhere in the play, the products were in play. Because the first thing is, mere ghar mein, would I have the rice? Would I have the oil? Would I have the spices to live? So these are some of the things which they went about and focused on. Here, I feel from a channel perspective, the general trade or the traditional trade that we talk about helped us survive this crisis. Because the e-commerce was nowhere in sight to go beyond a certain scale, because they were, with their baggage, they were doing well, but they never had the bandwidth to cater to this large scale shift that was happening. So the nearby Kirana was the king in the first phase, is my opinion. Then as the days evolved and we were going through the first phase slowly, I think the other factors started playing important for the modern consumer, or the Bharat that we are talking about, which lives in the states, in the tier 1 cities. They now went into intelligence because they knew that the supply chain issues of basic needs are taken care. They went into the second aspect of which was on safety, health, more health, immunity, more immunity. So these are some of the factors that everybody play with. So the second phase saw this change in the consumer from where basic living is going. They went into more, asking for something more, plus some bit of indulgence. Right, indulgence into making things at home. You had a lot of home cooks getting involved. You have more bakers involved. So the consumer changed into doing things which he or she was not doing at home. Now here, there was a change which was happening now. The biggest change that was now the consumers wanted a lot of information about the brand's product. So they went online because now they want to make sure that what they consumed or what they were doing were trustworthy, were having actual facts about the health consciousness. So these are some things which they evolved into and sought knowledge. Now, where do they go for knowledge? The electronic media was almost defunct during this time with nothing new happening. The only thing which was vibrant, and the press was hardly there during this time, the only thing which was vibrant is the online or the whole e-commerce stroke internet evolution. So consumers started going online more and more, not only for OTT, but for seeking information about what they consume. This is the biggest change that again happened during this 1.5 years. So it only grew. It only grew till the phase 2 and end of phase 2. Last 6 months, we had the same things getting stronger because consumers started shopping differently. Consumer asked preferences differently. Consumer was becoming more knowledgeable about what she or he wanted in this country. I still feel the Akhand Bharat, that is the larger perspective, rural, hasn't really been changing so much as we want, because there the impact of the pandemic or whatsoever has been, I would say, still lesser than what it was felt on the other part of the Bharat. Though they are changing now, but the pace of which the change happened till the tier 2, tier 3 cities is not yet seen in rural, is my feeling. So they did not make much change, or will make change. The next evolution would be there when all the brands play there. So this is my first gut feel about how the consumer evolved during those 2 years. The phase 3 was a bit out of syllabus. Everybody thought that we are done away with this pandemic. We are closer to ending this pandemic, and it has come. But I feel the disruption here, because the life is not a threat, thankfully, and touch wood, it remains so. I think this will also pass, is my opinion, with strengthening of this consumer behavior and customer experience.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mohan. On that note, actually, we really hope and we really pray that, the pandemic really, goes beyond us very soon. Great analogy of, Bharat and Akhand Bharat that you mentioned. I would really want to come to Himanshu here. Himanshu, your brand basically, services customers across the Bharat, Mahabharat and Akhand Bharat that Mr. Mohan really, defined here, right? What has been your assessment, right? We have seen a boom in e-commerce, especially during the pandemic phase. How have you seen your customer changing, and what are the characteristics that have evolved currently as
well? Thanks so much, Satrajit. And first and foremost, very warm greetings on behalf of Snapdeal to all of you. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you, ET, for this. Just as a quick, background, what I'll be talking about will be, of course, based on my own experiences as a retail professional and an e-com professional for many, many years. Not necessarily only Snapdeal, but having said that, we will discuss some aspects of Snapdeal as well. I think last, 2 years that we are talking about, close to 2 years, slightly less than 2 years, have been quite different from the earlier years that we are familiar with. And I think we are in the midst of the third wave. And I know that lots of our family, friends, people that we know have either just recovered from COVID, or some of them are still down with COVID. So here's the sobering thought of first, wishing everybody quick recovery, whoever is going through that. And coming to the subject of what has happened in the consumer landscape, I think if you look at look at Snapdeal as such, we, just as a background, we are a pure play value e-commerce platform. In terms of the sheer number of downloads of our app, it's huge. We have 200 million plus downloads. What is the core audience for us? The core audience for us is the value-seeking middle income customer, which can reside anywhere, but a large component of that resides in Bharat, as you call it. Yeah. Now, if we were to segment the population beyond the metros into the, let's say, 1 million plus towns and non-metros, and of course beyond 1, which is what we call as Bharat, which is really the small town India and rural India. From our perspective, a large proportion of our business is from that part of the country, which is the Bharat. So to just give you a quick understanding of the numbers, to put it in perspective, we have close to around 72% of our business coming from tier 2 towns and beyond, which is 1 million and lesser population towns. So 72 overwhelming percentage of our business is actually coming in from here. In terms of the consumers in the space, they are looking at quality, they are looking at wide selection, they're looking at pricing which is affordable. In terms of our own range, most of our range is below 600 rupees, yeah, and 95% plus of our sales is below 1,000. This is just to give you a background of what we are, to just explain what we are. But coming to the question of the pandemic, I think if you were to look at the consumers in Bharat, I think their primary method of shopping is actually a lot of entertainment, a lot of socializing, going to the markets, bazaar. We are a colorful country, so you have the vibrant markets, etc., etc. I think what happened during the last 2 years is a large number of them were trying to seek, a similar kind of experience online. And I think in line with what took place in the last 2 years, the adoption of both, taking to internet and then of course e-commerce picked up significantly. Uh, and from the perspective of the consumers, now they were trying to, in Bharat, they were trying to replicate the experience that they have in these bazaars, hats, and mandis. Yeah. And which is in terms of, discovering merchandise. We are tailored to have that discovery. So you need to discover merchandise. You don't keep come specifically searching for something. It's not a specific, very specific search. There is, but a large component of it is based on that whole joy of shopping. So how do you replicate the joy of shopping in your own language? So our app is there in 8 Indian languages. Yeah, our connect, contact center, WhatsApp, chat agents, everything is also as per the customer's language, whichever way they want to interact with us. So how do we make it colorful? How do we make it approachable? How do we make it discoverable? How do we make it easy for you to go through that whole process of discovering things as you go along? And in the process, you find things which are interesting. And how do we do it in your language, in your idiom, in your mechanism? Yeah. And I think that's the connect that we have been seeking. And I think like last 2 years that you're pointing out has been a lot of effort from both our side and your side, and the consumer side, in terms of making each other relevant for each other. And I think it's been a fascinating journey. At least I can speak from our own perspective, Snapdeal's perspective. And we have done a lot of personalization as well, which was earlier thought as a thing that only the urban customers or the metro consumers need. I think there's a lot of joy in even having that for the Bharat consumer. In fact, even more joy in having that personalization. So we do tremendous amount of personalization that we do. And as I said, we have also made it very easy for you, COD everywhere. We service most of the pin codes across the country, almost the entirety of the pin codes. I think it's been a wonderful experience despite the pandemic. I think it's been a wonderful experience, and in the whole process, the small amount of joy that that we may have brought to the consumers is the bonus for us.
Great. Thanks, Himanshu. I think you summed it up really well when you talk about experiences for consumers. Brands thrive to create that joyous factor, whenever they are interacting with the brands. I'll come to Namit here. Namit, Himanshu just basically helped us about understand the characteristics better when it comes to the Bharat consumer as in the consumers in non-metros. I would really want to ask you from your business perspective, right? Kutchina as a brand has been, present across the length and breadth of the country, and if I'm not wrong, it's more popular, in the Bharat markets. It reigns the Bharat markets. So, what has been your understanding about, your consumers, and how do their characteristics really differ when it comes to, metros / non-metros, or Bharat and metros?
Well, greetings from my side to all the panelists on a chilly morning, a warm greeting. Firstly, I'll say very in simple word that before pandemic also, we all knew that almost 70% of the market is Bharat, as we are saying. And we all knew that it is and it will grow in future. So all the companies were eyeing on that particular market, some way or the other. Maybe the penetration or the aggressiveness was missing, but we all had in view that, okay, we need to capture that part of the market. So whether it's pre-pandemic or post-pandemic, the idea was very clear, and the scope of the growth of the market and the consumer behavior study was very clear. But yes, of course, that got more momentum once the pandemic started. And I'll tell you how. My observation was that the moment the pandemic started, if you see, people who were staying in Bharat or non-metro cities, the first thing was the restriction of the movement. Of course, it was also for the metro cities, but they were anyway not moving too much. But that started in a more restrictive way. So they also opted for going more online, having more availability to the smartphone. And also one good thing that happened that during these few years, the government has spent a lot of money on getting electricity to all the places as far as possible. So the use of smartphone became very very normal for the Bharat consumers, which resulted in getting the information like at the click of a button. When we all know that maybe the non-metro consumers don't have so much of laptops and other things, but all other gadgets. But of course, mobile phone was something which was handy. And this has made them informed to a very large extent. And then we realized that now they were demanding all the services. See, as far as Kutchina goes, we are a lifestyle product, very less of essential, but more of a convenience and of a lifestyle. So during pandemic, we were very, we were little lost that what will our consumers behave, because as Mr. Krishna said, that abhi sabko necessity was the important thing in terms of food, clothing, shelter, ki how do we survive. But to a very surprising extent, we realized still the Bharat consumers supported us in a bigger way. They still went ahead and purchased. Maybe they didn't have so much of money to spend going outside. So they started spending more on their own lifestyle, on their housing, on buying a lot of products. And secondly, the most important thing that I realized as an entrepreneur was when you start feeling that the options are limited in terms of spending, and also when that first pandemic was little uncertain and little scary. So people thought, no, whatever money we have, let us now live with it. Let us not save the money for the future. That was the case in the first pandemic. And just after the lockdown got lifted, we got a huge response in terms of sales. Of course, in the second pandemic, it was more of a dangerous situation. So people started saving money for unknown future, because nobody knew what will happen, what next is going to come. So all I mean is that the consumer in the Bharat Metro had become very informative. They are exploring omnichannels. Initially, they used to only rely on the physical part of the product, like we had showrooms or they visited retail counters and all. But with the smartphone coming handy, they also started exploring channels. I got so many of queries through my sales channel that people are comparing with online, with Amazon, with Flipkart, because the products, we all know that in those channels there are discounting and a lot of facilities which generally the offline doesn't give. So people started comparing it, and we had to readjust ourselves in a way that the consumers should not feel cheated, that not buying online doesn't mean they're not getting the right facility. So we had to differentiate between certain facilities which they get offline and certain, of course, they get online. So a lot of information has changed the pattern of purchase of the Bharat consumers. And of course, money is there. I still believe that in metro, the consumers are more busy, they take very less time to do a choice. But there, the customers who are there in the local areas, they have got little more time to spend, to understand, to go through, to explore, even to ask references, to talk to their known people, to understand whether they should buy a product which is little costlier to them. So all these things had made us realize one thing, that we also have to now start treating them as a metro consumer, not just like we can give anything and they will buy anything. And of course, we also have to now pass discounts the way we have been passing discounts to metro consumers just because they are informed. Similarly, here also we have to start now passing the major discounts to the Bharat consumers. Only good thing is, of course, this has been helped by the larger volume of the business that now we are getting. So I think across Bharat consumers, the difference between metro and Bharat is getting little shortened. and they are or they want to behave the way like any metro consumer wants to behave. So now all the companies are getting adjusted to their way of buying the product. So I think this is the changes which has come in recently 2 years, which was supposed to maybe come after 5 years.
Thanks, Namit. It was indeed quite an eye-opener in that sense when we try to understand the consumers, the Bharat consumers, the metro consumers, and you rightly said that the difference between them is really I mean it's slimming right now. So this takes me to my next question to Mr. Mohan here, right? So we are talking about consumer experience, right? So we have seen a lot of national brands using huge plethora of technology when it comes to creating great experiences for consumers, right? And this, I mean, when it comes to the metro consumers especially. But there is a saying that in the Bharat consumer, for the Bharat consumer, the real experience lies in the relationship that a brand has with his, with the buyers. How true is that? And what sort of ways can a brand better its customer experience, especially for that segment of the market?
Yeah, I think you are right in saying that the relationship of the Bharat consumer has been much more stronger with the brands in general. Uh, that's because of the way the brands marketed themselves, some of the brands associated with them, some had the first mover advantage and got engagement with the consumer. So these are some of the factors which influenced loyalty to a large extent during that period before the pandemic, or even over the last few decades. That has been the phenomena. The consumer in the Bharat, I think, has always been more loyal to the brands than that of the metro because of the two, three reasons. One, the choices or the options that he had in the past were limited because the companies approaching them had, for their own bandwidth issues, not been really going through. This changed over the last decade quite a bit, especially in the FMCG space, where every company thought that the rural consumers is the next big bet that they should focus on. The companies developed formats or products which are for rural India, whether at their different pack formats, pricing, availability, the way they made sure that distribution channels evolved, the way they marketed their. I think all this was last decade saw an evolution of the rural marketing as such. And hence the consumers became more attuned or more closer to the brands because of the way the brands treated them, because they understood the needs. And the companies like ours or our parent company Emami did a lot of these activities to engage the rural consumers. Then came the, as Nimit and even Himanshu were pointing out, then came the tendency in the last couple of years where now they are demanding what the other consumers in the other part of the country are also wanting. So this change is the biggest change that is happening. So we have, during the pandemic, from an edible oil perspective, we launched an immunity booster oil, which was the first in the country. And we saw, not that it was we saw demand coming up from the smaller markets also for these kind of products, because they also wanted immunity. They also wanted the same offering which the consumers in the metros would privilege them. So we saw people lapping up to it during the pandemic. And this happened across many categories in the FMCG industry. So it made necessary for the brands to evolve and talk to these consumers, maybe the similar manner to what they do in metro or more personalized matter. The second thing which I'm seeing, more the information means the consumer is more learned now, and more the avenues for him to buy means that the more the choices he has now. I think that loyalty factor for a brand would see some change that is happening as the consumer has got multiple choice. So it's for you as a marketer to understand and make sure that you don't lose him by offering him more knowledge, more affinity towards your brand, and making sure you're successful in keeping him in your basket. So these are some of the things which we keep doing. We evolve. So we make sure that the availability across the channels now, whether he's going online, whether he's going to our website, whether he's going to our physical store, I think the presence becomes quite a bit important in the FMCG segment. So you have to be available wherever he is going for shopping, in whichever mode. And there is no if and but there. There are no choices there because consumers don't wait and they are not waiting today. And hence you need to make sure your execution of whatever you are doing in terms of engagement is more stronger, more oriented towards the people that are there in the Bharat segment. I also agree with Namit. There has been a lot of the rural has always been our biggest bet, or this Bharat has been always our biggest bet because we thought the metros would not grow as much as how the second tier, two tier, three tier, and the rural will grow. And I think we have evolved over a period on how we reach to the consumer thereon, either from a selling point of view or from an engagement point of view. And we have taken a lot of steps in this direction.
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Mohan. This actually brings me to my next question to Namit. Namit, we heard Mr. Mohan speak about that, we have to be there as brands. We need to be there wherever the consumers are. This brings me to this question of the online versus offline debate, right? You have been, you as a brand have been present across all platforms, right? How do you see the online versus offline debate really, relevant when it comes to the Bharat audience, the Bharat consumers that we are speaking over here, right? Are they interacting more online? Because online and offline, that experience really is what omnipresent experience is all about, right? So what's your thought on that, and how you as a brand is basically, strategizing towards servicing that segment well?
Well, this is a very controversial, it's a very basic question, but a very controversial answer. Any answer given in any favor of online or offline will lead to some problem in the sales segment, because this debate has been, I remember this debate has been going for 4 to 5 years, offline versus online. And I remember in one of the panel 5 years ago, we were discussing offline versus online. So few of the panelists told me personally that you don't have to worry because your product is appliances and modular kitchen, which will not affect offline because this will not be sold online. This was, I'm talking 4 to 5 years ago. So it is for the other brands to worry, but other product segment to worry, not for you. But today, when I'm sitting, from last 2 years, I've been struggling my team to convince that I have to be online. Because as I said earlier, that in the Bharat segment, predominantly we are serving through offline, because that is where the connect is. Because a consumer has the time, he can go to a retail shop, and he will always go to a retail shop of his long-term association, where the offline, the retail shop will serve him better. That is what his beliefs are, thoughts are. And also a very simple observation that in the Bharat areas where the consumers are generally late in the evening, still they can go easily, talk and discuss and find out 10 things and buy the product. So that is how the consumer journey is in terms of buying the product. This has changed drastically in two years' time because of the online catching up and they getting informations. Now it has become a very difficult situation because, of course, to survive online, a brand has to offer something special, which offline cannot do, as I said earlier. So that has been really very hard experience, because the moment consumer is going to a retail shop, from sitting there, he's again Googling and telling the retailers or my salesperson that, okay, this product is available at this, and this is the parallel product, which is almost similar feature, which is available at this rate. So it's becoming very difficult to convince a consumer to know that two products are different, because they are matching in terms of features, which was never a thing of the past. So of course, it's a very difficult situation, and it is going to stay for a few years from now on, and more intensified in the Bharat segment. The only thing that has to be done is we have to come with a creative solution. We have to differentiate the product offering. We have to differentiate the product line, the type of product, and the marketing style. And more services has to be made stronger, and that is how a combination has to be made in between offline and online, for them to realize that whether they buy offline or whether they buy online, they are still getting the same benefits as a consumer. So this, I think, has become more debatable, and it is going to intensify as the time passes by. But of course, after certain years, I think we all will start living more online and less offline.
This brings me to Himanshu here. Himanshu, we heard Namit about, mention about, strategizing the product line better to, meet the demands of the unmetro consumers, the Bharat consumers that we are specifically focusing over here today. So, what are the kind of tweaks in the product line that, you as an e-commerce player, right, introduce when it comes to, catering to that market? Like, some years down the line, there was a thing that, COD is more popular in those areas because of the low credit card and digital wallets penetration and so on and so forth. So now that we are in a stage of financial inclusion and financial inclusion has really spread its wings in the Bharat market as well. How do you see and what kind of tweaks in the product line as an e-commerce player you really introduce when it comes to servicing these parts?
For me, actually, if you really look at it, the consumer in Bharat, or for us at Snapdeal, consumer at Bharat, we need to look at him as a consumer, not of online, not of offline, but as a consumer. So, what is it that the consumer really wants? Yeah. The channel choice is actually that of the customer, depending on his or her requirement at that point of time. And I think there are certain things which are quite known about the Bharat consumer. Bharat consumer, by and large, is value conscious. Yeah, value conscious does not mean the cheapest, but by and large is very value conscious. Yeah, and this is a known fact. The other part which is there is that the quality perception or the requirement of quality is fairly high. They want goods which are of good quality. They want it to last. Yeah, that's again something which is strong in Bharat. Yeah. They also want everything at a good price. I think some of it was being alluded to, not just value, but they want it at a good price. So they want to know that, yes, I'm getting it. Not only I'm getting value, I'm also getting it at a good price. And for us, the whole construct that is there is in terms of how can I bring you brand wali quality, yeah, and bazaar wali deal. How do I bring you merchandise which actually fulfills your aspirations? What you look forward to a brand for that, but for that you are paying a huge amount of premium, and we know that you are value conscious and you're looking at value, and therefore how can I offer you the bazaar wali deal? How do I make sure that you get great quality but at good prices? So that's the first part, which is in terms of the merchandise that they buy. And as I explained in the earlier one, also the whole part of their discovery, the whole joyousness of discovering things. So I'll give you some examples. Yeah, as you are going through, our app or site or M site, most of the consumers incidentally are on mobiles. You know that the entire internet penetration has happened through mobiles. So for all practical purposes, we are discussing mobile consumers. Yeah, whether it is app or M site, it's on the mobile. And it's a nice one for them to actually scroll through and see things. So if you are interested in, let's say, gardening, you will chance upon things which pertain to gardening. A lot of people actually started doing gardening during this period in smaller towns. Yeah, whether you're looking for a dress, whether you're looking for a gift. We were speaking to some of the consumers. We do it all the time with our consumers, these sessions. Nowadays, of course, it is all on Google and Zoom, but it's very interesting. Yeah, the way they look forward to buying a gift for their spouse on the birthday, or let's say the wedding anniversary. Yeah, they are looking at something that will delight their spouse, but they're also looking at affordability, and of course they want good quality. Now, how do we make this whole journey easy? And some of the things that you talked about, COD is one part of that, but also along with that, a lot of them are getting comfortable with many of the fintech apps that allow easy UPI. Has grown by leaps and bounds, and with financial inclusion, as you're saying, most of them have the ability to pay for that. But it is the consumer's choice. They may want COD, but we need to enable all those, not just UPI, not just COD, but we need to enable credit card, net banking, and all debit card. All leave it to the consumer. Also, make sure that it is easy. One more point that I wanted to drive in terms of how we need to make it. We need to do the curation so that the consumer is able to get the merchandise, personalization, curation, to make the customer journey easier, to make it delightful, to make it more relevant, and in the customer's language. So, for example, in our case, whether it's the site or the app, everything is the things that you find written there are all slightly larger. It is in the language of the consumer. Yeah. So we are trying to make the whole journey much easier for the consumer. Then the consumer will sometimes buy in brick and mortar stores and sometimes will buy online, and that's the consumer's choice depending on the customer's requirement at that point of time. If you were to look at the Red Sea report, which has come out in 2021, which is of course a good report to look at, in Bharat, or the space that we are talking about, value commerce, 92% is brick and mortar, and just 8% is e-commerce. And I think it's not one versus the other. I think it's making yourself relevant to the consumer, and then the consumer actually at some point of time will buy in retail shops, some point of time will buy on e-commerce, and that's how it is.
So there is a follow-up question to this, and this is to Himanshu himself. So since you mentioned, the percentage divide, which is skewed towards, non-e-commerce, business, will it be then hard to create omnichannel CX, customer experiences for that segment of customers for businesses?
I would see it slightly differently. I think it's an opportunity. It depends on how you look at it. I think 92% in brick and mortar and 8% in e-commerce, as per the Red Sea report, I think opens up great possibilities for anybody wanting to do omni. Yeah, and that is something we have also seen some of the other other e-com players doing omni. We have seen. Now how it is to be done, what is to be done, is left to each player and as per their own mandate. But I think as an opportunity, it's a big opportunity because the consumer will experience both brick and mortar and e-commerce.
On that note, I really want to come to Mr. Mohan here. So, Mr. Mohan, we really saw from both Namit and Himanshu that the business is skewed towards offline in that market, right? Now, as an FMCG player, how do you look into it? Like, do you really think that going forward this will be the trend, or how do you see it changing? Because online is gathering that momentum, as we say.
Yeah, and the figures as they speak, which Himanshu has mentioned, we also validate that the large portion of the sales in the Bharat is still the physical stores. But I think it's very clear that this shift would happen because of the sheer population and the size of this country. The shift may be slower, but it will be going at a very fast pace, is my assumption. It will never beat in a country like India the physical domination of the physical channels. So I think it will continue to exist for some time. But I somehow see it doubling in the next 3 years in the Bharat is what I see to be. But now, if you take that, maybe it could be 16 and 85 or 15 and 85, which is still decent. But that shift will keep happening. It's for the brands to be present everywhere that the consumer goes in. And there are hardly any choices for brands to decide this or that unless you want to lose out. And I think no brand or no company would like to afford to miss out the engagement with the consumers, especially when they are in a space like FMCG or more closer to the essentials part. So we want to be present wherever consumer goes and shops. We don't have a choice, is what our opinion is. Now, how to do it? Do I have an answer? I do not have an answer. We are still grappling for answers here because it's a sudden change. It's a significant change because as long as it was metro, as long as it was a few cities down the pop strata, it was fine. But now we are seeing this change happening definitely. And we need to evolve and adopt our strategies both from a consumer understanding and a customer understanding to be able to meet the requirements. At the end of the day, not being present is not the answer. Grow with them, understand them, and adapt yourselves to their needs is the solution that I would get. From our point of view, we are studying the whole consumer behavior, the usage and attitudes changes that have happened over the 2 years, and how that has affected the staple basket or the food basket per se. Because it's important to be aware of what are the changes that are happening in the consumer mindset. Something is theoretical in nature, but something at the ground levels are far different than what are published or what we come to know a little later. So we need to understand the changes. We are spending a lot of our time and efforts on making sure that those insights are brought onto our table so that we are able to be more informed about the decisions that we are taking.
Right. This brings me to Namit. Namit, you mentioned about marketing here, right? How do you see the role of marketing, right? In catering to that segment of the customer better, and creating experiences for that customer as a brand. So the role of marketing in the entire plethora of creating experiences for Bharat.
Yeah, I can of course share my product line, because we are more, as I said, we are more into FMCD, consumer durables.
Right.
So for us, it is for a customer, it is very important. After sale service is the most important factor, because once they buy the product, the experience start with buying the product rather than before that. One thing I'd like to clarify what Mr. Mohan was saying. Maybe in future, product line has to be similar. We cannot differentiate between the metro customers and non-metro customers in terms of product line, because everybody is informed. They've got the money. They've got uh, the lifestyle of using any product which is available anywhere. Certain kitchens of mine, which are metro consumers, even refuges are bought by non-metro customers, and it gives us a lot of surprise. So product offering has to be same. Marketing, I think, has to be adaptable to the Bharat consumers. We have to go to their market. Now we have to be more localized in terms of language. I'll just give a small example. I've got consumers in Northeast. So instead of having a call center with normal English and Hindi speaking guys, now I have started adapting to certain places with the local language for Northeast, for certain other places, because it is now easy. One thing I've realized is consumers are connecting to the localized flavor once again. There was a time when people were going all gaga over, multinational things and all. No, people have again become specific to their own need. Biggest example is OTT platforms. If Netflix would have survived alone, there would not have been a need of localized regional OTT platforms, because people need to interact with the regional. So marketing has to be based on the local need. Rather, consumers coming to our side, a time was there when, as a brand, you can drive consumers the way you want. But now it is the consumer who is driving their need, and you have to adapt to their wishes. So I think marketing has to be only in terms of localized, more localized infrastructure. Good thing is that in India has a good infrastructure shift, good roads, electricity, internet connections, and everything. So warehousing, if you see example, Amazon and Flipkarts, now they are serving more than 400, 500 cities in India with the warehousing in different parts of the even interior places also. So I think marketing has to be more localized. Number two is more BTL activities has to be done in the Bharat segment. In metro, it can be more of ATL activities, because still you can get connected to those consumers, explain your product, convince the product, build relationship, and sell them. So these are the few marketing changes that will be required to adapt to those consumers.
Great. On that note, since we are almost running out of time, I'll really want to come to all my panelists here, right, and maybe do a crystal gazing kind of thing, right? So we are speaking about Bharat here, the Bharat market, the Bharat segment. Where do we see Bharat 5 years down the line? Considering your business line here, right? So considering your category, considering your brand, how do you see the role of Bharat evolving, for your brand in the next 5 years? So we can start with Himanshu here, and then we come to all of the panelists.
I think it's very important to look at organized data when we do anything of this kind, because it's important to do that. It's more structured. Again, I'm referring to the same Red Seer report, which is actually quite an insightful report. But the same Red Seer report actually talks about that the online shoppers who are in the emerging is nothing but 2 to 5 lakh household income per annum. Yeah, large component of this actually is in Bharat. There is bits and pieces of this in metros, but large significant cluster of this is in Bharat. Now this category of customers, according to that report, will go up from 7.8 crores today. In 5 years time, 2026, it will go to 25.6 crores. Now that is humongous. What they're also saying is in the value e-commerce space, which is where we are, yeah, as I told you, the data, 92% is brick and mortar, 8% is online. They are saying the size of the pie will double. So that's their forecast, that the size of the pie itself will double overall. $88 billion will go to $175 billion market. But very interestingly, they are saying that e-commerce will move up from 8% to 22% by 2026. Now, what this means is that actually the overall pie will increase, and so will brick and mortar. Yeah, but e-commerce will see a trajectory which is significantly higher in terms of the growth rate. It'll go up and grab a share of 22%, but not that brick and mortar is going to lose out. It is also going to grow. I gave you the numbers. So I think from the perspective of the consumer experiences, we will, need to take this into account in terms of building the experiences for the customer, whether it is online, whether it is offline or only. Thank you.
Correct. Great. Namit, your take. Where do you see the Bharat consumer growing in the next 5 years, especially when it's your business is concerned?
Two, three things are very clear. As Himanshu mentioned, market is going to expand very high. The growth will be 2-3 times. That goes without saying. Second thing is omni-channel has to be there. Whether we like it or we don't like it, we have to be present in all the forms of channel where the consumers are buying the product or looking for the product. So we cannot shy away from anything. Third is, again, the right infrastructure has to be there to serve them the way we are serving metro consumers right now. As I said earlier, now metro consumers might have took, say, suppose 5 years to for an organic change or inorganic change. The Bharat consumers will now take half the time to adapt to all the online changes and the technological changes and everything. They will demand everything in just half the time. So the time is running fast for us to adapt to their requirement. And lastly, but not the least, which is true, ultimately the keyword is convenience. Consumers will always look for convenience. You as a brand has to just see that how much convenient you are to them, so that they can buy your product in the most easiest and convenient way, whether it comes to discount, whether it comes to good product, whether it comes to value terms, whether after sale service, anything. Convenience will rule the key thing in next 5 years.
Great. Thanks, Namit. Mr. Mohan, your take.
I will talk about it in two parts. One is the food category per se, and then the category that we exist today, that is the edible oil. I feel the food, the packaged food will grow close to about, I'm talking about all India as of now, the first number. So will grow in close to the 20% mark is my estimate. So that will be a lot of growth that is coming in. And I feel the Bharat growth would be double that of the urban. So that's how I look at it. And the third cut that I feel, as I mentioned, the e-commerce platform would ultimately contribute to anything between 16 to 20% is my estimate in the next 3 years to the overall sales. So I agree with Himanshu. There will be a larger growths that are going to come in the next few years. The story is in Bharat, and it's better to be there. And the story is also in e-commerce, but don't ignore the brick and mortar. Don't write them off in a country like India.
Great. On that note, we have really, come to an end of today's discussion here. I really want to thank all my panelists here for giving us that inputs and invaluable time and inputs on understanding the Bharat consumer better and understanding how can brands and businesses really strategize their customer experience journey towards creating, great and loyal customers in that segment of the market. On that note, thank you so much for joining us, and stay tuned to ETBrandEquity.
Thank you. Thank you, Satrajit.
Thank you, panelists, for imparting some valuable takeaways. Certainly a very insightful discussion. Now let's move to the next session. Stay with us.